Imagine you're a 9-year-old Yazidi girl named Nadia Murad, the year 2014, your small village trembling under the roar of ISIS fighters, the air thickens with the acrid, choking smell of smoke billowing from burning homes, the sharp, metallic tang of fear coating your throat as you watch their shadows drag your mother away, her desperate cries piercing the chaos before they shove you onto a rickety bus with dozens of other terrified children, your tiny hands shaking uncontrollably. What happened next wasn't a random act of wartime cruelty but part of a system so brutal, so methodically organized, that the United Nations would later classify it as genocide, a chilling continuation of a practice honed across 14 centuries of Islamic conquest, stretching from the earliest caliphates under the Prophet Muhammad's successors to the modern atrocities of ISIS in 2025. This is the untold story of how Islamic caliphates transformed the sexual enslavement of captured women into a weapon of conquest, a hidden terror that shaped medieval empires and still casts a shadow over our world today. Historians once dismissed it as exaggerated enemy propaganda, but the evidence, meticulous court records, harrowing survivor testimonies, and archaeological discoveries like slave market ledgers, paints an undeniable, horrifying picture, from the Abbasid harems where thousands of women were catalogued like livestock to the Ottoman slave raids that ripped families apart, leaving echoes in the Yazidi genocide. This wasn't mindless violence, it was a calculated strategy of control, and we're only beginning to peel back its layers. If this shocks you to your very core, hit that like button and subscribe now, comment below where you're watching from, your voice keeps these forgotten stories alive. The foundation of this horror was laid in the early caliphates, where conquest meant more than seizing land, it meant harvesting human souls to fuel an empire's power. Picture the relentless scene, the clatter of steel swords clashing against wooden shields, the sour, sweat-soaked stench of armored warriors filling the air, the cold, unyielding weight of iron chains binding your wrists as Muslim armies sweep across the sun-scorched plains of Byzantine cities, their banners snapping in the dusty wind. The theological justification came straight from the Quran, etched into the very fabric of Islamic law. Verse 424 permits sexual relations with captive women, declaring them permissible spoils, while verse 33:50 elevates women, possessed by the right hand, as lawful rewards for warriors. This wasn't a fringe interpretation twisted by extremists, it was a foundational doctrine, creating a legal framework that turned rape into a religious duty and enslavement into a divine right. As armies conquered Persia, North Africa, and beyond, they didn't just claim territory, they harvested women and children, labeling them sabaya, or captives whose bodies became the property of their Muslim conquerors. The process began with the fall of each city, where soldiers sifted through the rubble to select their prizes, a practice so ingrained it was recorded in administrative scrolls. Was this a sacred mandate bestowed by faith or a brutal justification for unchecked power, a system built on the shattered lives of the vulnerable? The question lingers as the chains dig deeper into your skin. Many endured this dehumanizing beginning, their identities stripped away in the blink of an eye, their fear a silent scream swallowed by the triumphant roars of victory, their stories buried beneath the shifting sands of time, their resilience a faint whisper lost to history. The process was chillingly methodical, a bureaucracy of exploitation that rivaled the grandeur of any empire's administration, turning human suffering into a finely tuned machine. Imagine the oppressive, heart-pounding atmosphere, the sharp, resounding crack of an overseer's whip slicing through a dusty market square, the metallic clink of coins exchanging hands as buyers haggle, the heavy, suffocating dread pressing down on your chest as you're torn from your family and subjected to a cold, clinical examination like livestock at a fair. The Abbasid Caliphate, rising to power in the 8th century, elevated this into a sophisticated institution that would define Islamic empires for a millennium. Persian historian Wasaf likened conquering armies to hungry falcons attacking a flight of doves, vividly describing how veiled women were dragged through the narrow streets and alleys of fallen cities, their fates sealed by the stroke of a pen as they were catalogued in ledgers. The most beautiful were reserved for high-ranking commanders and eventually the caliph himself, their worth assessed with the precision of a merchant, while others were herded into slave markets stretching from the opulent courts of Baghdad to the bustling ports of Cordoba. Archaeological evidence, faded market ledgers, rusted slave collars unearthed in medieval ruins, confirms the staggering scale, a trade so vast it funded the glittering mosques of Cairo and the palaces of Damascus. Was this a stroke of economic genius that built an empire's splendor or a moral abyss hidden behind a facade of grandeur, a horror masked by the clinking of gold? The question lingers as the market buzzes with activity, the air thick with despair. Many suffered in this organized captivity, their resilience a fragile, flickering thread snapped by the weight of their new reality, their pain a hidden cost etched into the foundation of a civilization built on their backs. But this was merely the opening chapter. What awaited in the harems, where exploitation was elevated to an art form? Smash that like button if you're intrigued to know more, and subscribe now to uncover the next layer of this chilling history. Imagine you're a young woman in a conquered Byzantine village, the year 750 CE, your world crumbling as Muslim warriors surge through the streets, the air grows heavy with the bitter, acrid scent of charred wood from your smoldering home, the sharp, metallic tang of blood-stained steel ringing in your ears as they seize you, your wrists bound with coarse, rough rope that bites into your skin, your heart pounding wildly as they drag you into a chaotic, dust-choked encampment. What follows isn't a fleeting moment of chaos but a system so calculated, so ruthlessly organized, that it turns your capture into a grim inventory, a direct extension of the conquests we unveiled in Part 1, where Islamic Caliphates honed the sexual enslavement of women into a weapon of dominance that shaped empires. This wasn't random plunder born of war's madness, it was a methodical process, etched into historical records and survivor testimonies, from the Abbasid harems where thousands were catalogued with chilling precision to the Ottoman raids that shattered families across generations, its echoes still felt in the Yazidi horrors of 2014 and beyond. The evidence, faded market ledgers, ancient legal scrolls, rusted remnants of chains, lays bare how women were examined, categorized, and distributed, a horror that built the grandeur of medieval Islamic civilization and lingers in our world today. If this unsettles you to your soul, hit that like button and subscribe now. Comment below what you think so far, your voice helps us remember the forgotten. The capture began with the fall of each city, a harvest of human lives orchestrated with a precision that chills the blood. Picture the relentless, deafening scene, the thunderous crash of collapsing stone walls shaking the earth, the sour, sweat-drenched reek of armored warriors filling the air as they sift through the rubble of your village, the cold, unyielding bite of rough rope cutting into your wrists as you're yanked from a hidden corner, your desperate cries drowned out by the triumphant din of conquest. When Muslim armies swept across the sun-scorched plains of Persia, the fertile lands of North Africa, and the fortified cities of Byzantium, they didn't just claim territory, they claimed people, labeling captured women as sabaya, war spoils sanctified by Quranic verses 424 and 33:50, which declared them permissible and rightful rewards. The process was immediate and unrelenting. Soldiers combed through the debris, their boots crunching over broken tiles, selecting women based on age, health, and perceived beauty. Their fates decided by the flicker of a commander's approving gaze. Historical chronicles, like those penned by Al-Tabari, detail how the spoils were divided with military efficiency, the most striking women reserved for elite commanders and the caliph himself, while others were herded toward sprawling slave markets. Was this a divinely ordained right bestowed by faith or a ruthless exploitation cloaked in religious rhetoric, a system that turned human worth into a cold, calculated bargaining chip? The question lingers as the ropes dig deeper into your flesh. Many endured this initial terror, their identities stripped away in an instant, their fear a constant, oppressive shadow cast by the conqueror's banners, their stories swallowed by the roar of victory, their resilience a faint, flickering ember buried beneath the weight of their new reality. The examination was a cold, dehumanizing ritual that transformed you into a mere commodity, stripped of voice or agency. Imagine the oppressive, heart-pounding atmosphere, the sharp, resounding crack of an overseer's staff striking the parched ground, the stale, dusty smell of a makeshift tent flapping in the wind, the heavy, suffocating dread pressing down on your chest as you're forced to stand before a line of stern evaluators, their unfeeling eyes assessing your every feature with the detachment of a merchant inspecting goods. The Abbasid Caliphate, rising to prominence in the 8th century, turned this grim process into a refined art form, a bureaucracy of exploitation that rivaled the empire's architectural marvels. Persian historian Wasaf paints a vivid, haunting picture, likening conquering armies to hungry falcons attacking a flight of doves, describing how captured women were brought before officials in dusty courtyards, their dignity stripped away as they were inspected for virginity and catalogued by beauty, health, and potential value, their worth scribbled into leather-bound ledgers with the scratch of a quill. The most attractive were set aside for the caliph and his commanders, their lives now tethered to the capricious whims of power, while others faced the grim fate of slave markets stretching from the opulent courts of Baghdad to the bustling ports of Cordoba. Archaeological evidence, faded market records unearthed in medieval ruins, rusted chains still bearing the marks of wear, confirms the staggering scale of this trade, a network so vast it funded the glittering mosques of Cairo, the palaces of Damascus, and the intellectual hubs of the Islamic Golden Age. Was this a mark of imperial efficiency that built a civilization's splendor, or a moral collapse hidden behind the veneer of bureaucracy, a horror so normalized it became a cornerstone of their success? The question lingers as the pen etches your fate into history. Many suffered through this degradation, their spirits shattered by the relentless process, their pain a silent, enduring tribute to the empire's growth, their resilience buried deep under the crushing weight of their new, inescapable reality. But the horror only deepened from here. What awaited after this examination, in the shadowed depths of the harems? Smash that like button if you're captivated by this unraveling, and subscribe now to dive into the next chilling chapter. Imagine you're a captured woman from a fallen Persian town, the year 850 CE, your spirit trembling as you're dragged into a dimly lit, echoing courtyard. The air grows thick with the stale, musty odor of damp stone walls slick with moisture, the faint, bitter tang of fear sweat clinging to your skin as overseers circle you, their voices cold and detached as they strip away your name, your past, your very identity with each deliberate word. What unfolds is a psychological breaking so ruthless it erases who you were, a direct continuation of the capture and examination from parts 1 and 2, where Islamic Caliphates transformed sexual enslavement into a tool of absolute control, reshaping human lives to serve their empire. This wasn't merely physical captivity, it was a deliberate, systematic destruction of the self, etched into historical accounts and survivor testimonies, from the Abbasid harems where women were molded into submission to the Ottoman raids that silenced entire lineages. Its echoes reverberating in the trauma of Yazidi survivors in 2014 and the shadows of 2025. The evidence, faded legal texts, hidden personal diaries, whispered oral histories, unveils a machinery of forced conversion and psychological torment, a horror we're now compelled to face head-on. If this chills you to your core, hit that like button and subscribe now. Comment below what scares you most. Your voice honors the silenced voices of the past. The process began with the erasure of your identity, a calculated assault on your very humanity that left no room for resistance. Picture the oppressive, heart-wrenching scene, the harsh, grating scrape of a quill against rough parchment as your old name is scratched out and replaced with an unfamiliar Arabic one, the sour, dusty smell of a crowded holding pen where bodies press against you, the heavy, suffocating weight of despair settling over your shoulders as you're surrounded by strangers, your family torn away in the blink of an eye. In the Abbasid Caliphate, captured women from conquered lands, Persian princesses, Byzantine daughters, North African villagers, were subjected to a relentless psychological overhaul designed to sever their ties to their former lives. Historians like al-Masudi document how these women were given new identities, forced to learn Arabic under threat, and compelled to convert to Islam, their refusal met with the shadow of punishment looming overhead. The Quran's legal framework, reinforced by hadiths praising the Prophet's companions for taking captives, justified this transformation, framing it as a spiritual elevation for the enslaved. Was this a religious purification meant to save souls or a cruel tactic to crush resistance, a system that wielded identity as a weapon to enforce submission and erase the past? The question lingers as your memories fade into the darkness. Many endured this soul-shattering loss, their spirits fractured by the relentless assault, their fear a constant, oppressive companion in the suffocating silence, their stories buried beneath the weight of forced faith, their resilience a fragile, flickering hope snuffed out by the decree of their captors. The conversion was enforced with unrelenting brutality, a tool to mold you into a vessel of obedience for the empire's will. Imagine the tense, nerve-wracking atmosphere, the sharp, resounding crack of a whip against cold stone to enforce absolute silence, the stale, dry taste of meager bread rations forced upon you, the cold, unyielding stare of a guard as you're taught new prayers in a language not your own, your every act of resistance met with the sting of blows or the threat of death. Ottoman records and Abbasid decrees reveal how refusal to convert brought immediate consequences, beatings administered with cold precision, starvation imposed as punishment, or execution as a warning to cow the rest into compliance. Women were stripped of their religious symbols, crosses hidden in their clothing, amulets clutched in secret, replaced with Islamic garb and forced rituals, their minds reshaped through endless repetition and the ever-present shadow of fear. Survivor accounts, preserved in hidden manuscripts smuggled out of harems, speak of women learning to feign gratitude to survive, their voices hollowed by the process, their spirits bent under the weight of imposed faith. Legal texts from the period, like those of al-Shafi'i, codified this breaking, detailing rules to ensure compliance through terror and intimidation, turning resistance into a luxury few could afford. Was this a path to salvation promised by their captors or a prison of the soul forged in violence, a horror disguised as divine will to justify their suffering? The question lingers as the whip falls once more. Many suffered through this torment, their resilience tested to the breaking point, their pain a silent, enduring cry lost to the annals of history, their identities rewritten against their will, their humanity reduced to a shadow of its former self. But the control only tightened from here. Who were the guardians of this broken system, and how were they created to enforce such cruelty? Smash that like button if you're gripped by this unfolding tale. And subscribe now to dive into the next layer of this chilling history. Imagine you're a young boy, barely 10 years old, torn from your Christian village in 900 CE, your world collapsing under the weight of Ottoman raiders, the air grows thick with the sour, pungent stench of unwashed leather armor and the faint, metallic tang of fear as they bind your trembling hands with coarse rope, your muffled cries swallowed by the chaos as they lead you to a shadowed, suffocating tent where a cold, gleaming blade awaits. What follows is a brutality so severe it forged the guardians of a system we've traced through parts 1 to 3, where Islamic caliphates turned sexual enslavement into a cornerstone of control, now relying on eunuchs to enforce its iron grip. This wasn't a random act of wartime violence, it was a calculated, systematic process, etched into historical texts and survivor tales, from the Abbasid harems guarded by castrated men to the Ottoman Empire's relentless machinery, its echoes still reverberating in the trauma of Yazidi survivors in 2014 and the shadows of 2025. The evidence, ancient medical records, rigid legal codes, whispered accounts, unveils a castration process with a staggering 90% mortality rate, a horror we must now confront with open eyes. If this grips you with dread, hit that like button and subscribe now, comment below your reaction, your voice keeps the memory of their suffering alive. The castration process was a nightmare of unimaginable cruelty, a ritual that shaped the eunuchs who policed this oppressive system. Picture the harrowing, gut-wrenching scene, the sharp, icy sting of a cold, unsterilized blade held by a trembling hand, the stale, blood-heavy air of a dimly lit tent thick with tension, the unbearable, crushing weight of terror as you're restrained on a rough wooden table, your future stolen in a single, agonizing cut. In the Abbasid Caliphate, boys, often Christian or Jewish captives snatched from their homes, were subjected to castration without anesthesia, a procedure performed by non-Muslim practitioners due to Islamic law's prohibition on Muslims wielding the blade, though they eagerly reaped the benefits of the outcome. Historical accounts, like those of al-Biruni, document a 90% mortality rate, the survivors divided into black eunuchs from Ethiopia or white eunuchs from Caucasian regions, condemned to lifelong servitude with their bodies mutilated and their dreams of family or freedom severed forever. The process was swift but devastating, carried out in secrecy with crude tools, leaving the living as hollow shells of their former selves. Was this a necessary sacrifice to maintain order within the harem's walls or a barbaric tool of oppression that turned innocence into a lifetime of anguish, a system that thrived on the suffering of the powerless? The question lingers as the blade slices through your hope. Many perished in this torment, their young bodies unable to withstand the shock, their resilience crushed under the weight of such cruelty, their fear a silent echo fading into the tense shadows, their stories lost to the shifting sands of time, their sacrifice a grim, unspoken foundation for the empire's opulent facade. Eunuchs became the enforcers, their own suffering weaponized to control the women they guarded. Imagine the oppressive, soul-crushing atmosphere, the dull, rhythmic thud of a wooden staff striking cold stone as you patrol the harem's labyrinthine corridors, the musty, oppressive scent of locked chambers filled with despair, the heavy, suffocating guilt weighing on your chest as you oversee women whose lives mirror your own broken past, their eyes reflecting your lost humanity. Ottoman records, detailed in the Chronicles of al-Makrizi, describe how eunuchs, castrated before puberty to ensure loyalty, were tasked with overseeing the harems, administering punishments, and managing slave inventories, transforming them into instruments of the caliph's unyielding will. Their psychological torment was profound. Denied the possibility of normal human relationships, they were forced to uphold the very exploitation that had destroyed their own lives, a twisted irony etched into their existence. Legal texts, such as those of Ibn Hisham, codified their servitude, detailing their duties with cold precision, ensuring they remained bound to a system that offered no escape. Survivor accounts, rare and fragmented, hint at the internal conflict of these men, torn between their own pain and the orders they enforced. Was this a role of imposed power that elevated them above their past, or a prison of the soul forged by their own mutilation, a horror born from the depths of their suffering to perpetuate the cycle? The question lingers as the staff strikes the stone once more. Many endured this dual agony, their resilience a faint, flickering spark dimmed by guilt and duty, their pain a shared burden with the women they guarded, their stories a testament to a system's relentless cruelty, their voices silenced by the weight of their enforced roles. But the exploitation didn't stop there. What entertainments did the elite devise to further their dominance? Smash that like button if you're drawn into this unfolding nightmare, and subscribe now to uncover the next chilling chapter. Imagine you're a young boy, barely 12 years old, forced into a glittering Ottoman court in 1600 CE, your heart racing with dread as you're dressed in silken robes that chafe against your skin, the air filling with the cloying, overpowering scent of burning incense and the sharp, acrid sting of sweat as a leering, boisterous crowd surrounds you, their hands reaching out, their laughter a cruel, mocking echo that pierces your soul. What follows is a twisted spectacle of exploitation, a chilling continuation of the systems we've uncovered in parts 1 to 4, where Islamic caliphates turned sexual enslavement into a tool of dominance, now extending to the Cossack dancers and Tafsanoglan boys as instruments of the elite's pleasure. This wasn't mere entertainment to pass the time, it was a deliberate extension of control, a practice documented in historical accounts and eyewitness reports, from the vibrant yet violent Ottoman festivals to the secretive indulgences of the powerful, its shadows still cast across the abuses documented in 2025. The evidence, detailed court records, traveler diaries, fragmented survivor tales, unveils a culture of forced performance and hidden suffering, a horror we must now confront with unflinching resolve. If this unsettles you to your core, hit that like button and subscribe now. Comment below your thoughts, your voice amplifies the stories of the forgotten. The Cossack dancers were a haunting display of coerced artistry, their youth exploited for the elite's perverse amusement. Picture the oppressive, suffocating scene, the rhythmic, insistent clatter of tambourines echoing through a crowded, candlelit hall, the heavy, musky scent of perfumed oils mixing with the dry dust kicked up by dancing feet, the suffocating weight of dread pressing down as you're pushed to perform, your body no longer your own but a tool for their entertainment. In the Ottoman Empire, Cossack were young boys, often Christian captives snatched from their homes, trained rigorously to dance in women's clothing, their movements a forced seduction designed to captivate raucous audiences of nobles and soldiers. Historical accounts, like those of Evliya Shalebi, a 17th-century traveler, describe how these boys, adorned in silk tunics and jingling bells, faced violent crowds whose admiration often turned to physical assault, their performances a public spectacle that ended in the shadows of private abuse by their patrons. This practice persisted for centuries, thriving in the courts of Istanbul and beyond, until public outrage and internal pressure from religious leaders led to its ban in the 19th century, yet not before generations of boys had suffered under its weight. Was this a cherished cultural tradition celebrated by the empire or a grotesque mask for exploitation, a system that turned the innocence of youth into a stage for unrelenting cruelty? The question lingers as the tambourine's rhythm slows. Many endured this torment, their resilience battered by each forced step, their fear a constant shadow cast by the crowd's leering eyes, their stories drowned by the cheers and jeers, their pain a hidden cost woven into the fabric of the empire's revelry, their voices silenced by the weight of their imposed roles. The Tafsanoglan system plunged even deeper into secrecy and shame, a hidden layer of exploitation. Imagine the tense, nerve-wracking atmosphere, the soft, ominous rustle of velvet curtains in a darkened, opulent chamber, the faint, bitter taste of fear coating your tongue as a high-ranking official approaches with a predatory gaze, your youth a commodity in a shadowed, unspoken deal. Tafsanoglan, or bunny boys, were young Christian boys, often orphans or captives taken during raids, brought into the households of Ottoman elites for sexual gratification, their existence a secret maintained without legal status or protection. Ottoman chroniclers, like Pasevi, hint at this practice in veiled terms, noting how these boys were kept in isolation, their lives a relentless cycle of submission and enforced silence, their presence a private indulgence for the powerful who sought to avoid public scrutiny. Unlike the Cossack, whose suffering was at least partially visible, Tavsinoglan endured in the dark, their exploitation a whispered scandal among the elite, leaving no public record but the deep, invisible scars on their souls. Archaeological hints, discreet chambers in elite residences, suggest the scale, though direct evidence remains scarce due to the secrecy. Was this a privilege of unchecked power enjoyed by the elite or a silent horror buried in the shadows of their opulence, a system that thrived on the unseen suffering of the powerless? The question lingers as the curtains draw shut. Many suffered in this obscurity, their resilience a faint, desperate whisper crushed by isolation, their pain a secret etched into the cold stone walls, their stories lost to the silence imposed upon them, their humanity reduced to a tool for the elite's desires. But the exploitation didn't end with these entertainments. What fate awaited women in the sprawling markets and breeding programs? Smash that like button if you're captivated by this unfolding nightmare, and subscribe now to dive into the next harrowing chapter. Imagine you're a woman from a raided North African village, the year 1000 CE, your heart pounding with terror as you're marched into a sprawling, sun-scorched slave market. The air grows thick with the pungent, overwhelming smell of unwashed bodies pressed together and the sharp, metallic clink of coins as traders barter with cold precision, your wrists chafed raw by iron shackles that bite into your skin, your spirit breaking as you're forced onto a raised wooden platform for all to see. What unfolds is a marketplace of misery, a chilling continuation of the horrors we've traced through parts 1 to 5, where Islamic caliphates turned sexual enslavement into an economic juggernaut, now expanding to slave markets and breeding programs that fueled the empire's insatiable appetite for power. This wasn't a mere side effect of war's chaos, it was a deliberate, industrialized system of exploitation, meticulously recorded in historical documents and archaeological finds, from the vast trade networks of the Abbasid Caliphate to the relentless supply chains of the Ottoman Empire. Its legacy still felt in the human trafficking reports haunting 2025. The evidence: yellowed market ledgers, rusted chains unearthed from medieval ruins, fragmented survivor accounts, unveils a machinery of suffering so vast it built the glittering mosques and palaces of Islamic civilization, a truth we must face with unflinching courage. If this horrifies you to your depths, hit that like button and subscribe now. Comment below your feelings, your voice honors the struggle of those lost to this system. The slave markets were a grim hub of human commerce, transforming lives into cold, hard profit with ruthless efficiency. Picture the oppressive, soul-crushing scene, the incessant, overlapping chatter of haggling voices rising like a storm in a dusty, crowded square, the sour, acrid stench of sweat and fear mingling with the parched earth beneath your feet, the heavy, clanging weight of iron shackles dragging at your ankles as you're paraded before a line of buyers, their eyes appraising you like livestock. The Abbasid Caliphate established these markets as early as the 8th century, turning cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba into bustling centers where women from conquered lands, Persian, Byzantine, North African, were displayed for sale. Historical records, such as those penned by al-Muqaddasi, a 10th-century geographer, describe how women were meticulously categorized by age, health, and beauty, the most striking fetching prices equivalent to small fortunes paid in gold dinars, while others were sold in bulk to brothel operators, agricultural estates, or distant households. Archaeological digs have unearthed market ledgers detailing transactions with chilling detail, alongside rusted chains and raised platforms still bearing the scars of use, proving a trade network so vast it funded the opulent mosques of Cairo, the towering palaces of Damascus, and the intellectual advancements of the Islamic Golden Age. Was this a brilliant economic strategy that underpinned a civilization's splendor or a moral abyss disguised as legitimate commerce? A system that turned human flesh into a currency of conquest? The question lingers as coins clink in greedy hands. Many suffered this degradation, their resilience tested to its limits, their fear a constant, oppressive companion in the marketplace's din, their stories erased by the ink of ledgers, their pain a silent foundation for the empire's wealth, their voices swallowed by the crowd's indifference. Breeding programs added a layer of calculated cruelty, turning reproduction into a tool of enslavement. Imagine the tense, despairing atmosphere, the faint, scratchy rustle of straw in a locked, airless pen, the bitter, stale taste of water forced down your throat by rough hands, the cold, unyielding gaze of overseers as you're paired with another captive for reproduction, your future stolen with each forced union. The Ottoman Empire, building on the Abbasid model, developed systematic breeding programs to produce a steady supply of enslaved offspring, ensuring a perpetual cycle of labor and concubines to serve the elite. Chronicles like those of Katip Shalebi, an Ottoman historian, note how women were selected for their physical health and reproductive potential, subjected to forced pairings under the watchful eyes of overseers, their children claimed as property if acknowledged by a master, while the mothers remained bound in servitude. Legal codes, such as those in the Hanafi school of Islamic jurisprudence, permitted this practice, offering no rights to the women, no say in their pairings, no claim to their offspring, reducing them to breeding stock. Survivor accounts, rare and heartbreaking, preserved in hidden manuscripts, speak of the emotional toll, the wrenching loss of maternal bonds as children were torn away, their cries fading into the distance. Was this a pragmatic solution to meet the empire's labor needs or a dehumanizing experiment that turned birth into an extension of bondage, a system that commodified life itself? The question lingers as the overseer's ledger records your child's fate. Many endured this torment, their resilience shattered by each forced pregnancy, their pain a silent, enduring legacy passed to their offspring, their stories buried under the weight of chains that bound the next generation. But the system's reach didn't stop there. How did it shape the future of empires and societies? Smash that like button if you're gripped by this tale, and subscribe now to uncover the next harrowing chapter. Imagine you're standing in a quiet museum in 2025, the faint hum of distant visitors filling the air, your gaze fixed on a rusted slave collar from an ancient market. The air grows heavy with the dusty, musty scent of aged exhibits and a subtle, lingering chill of history brushing against your skin as a shadow of a Yazidi survivor's story whispers through your mind, her pain echoing across centuries. What you're witnessing is the enduring, haunting echo of a system we've traced through parts 1 to 6, where Islamic caliphates turned sexual enslavement into a weapon of conquest, its legacy now intertwining with the practices of ancient Greece and the shadows of modern exploitation. This wasn't a forgotten relic of the past, it was a blueprint that shaped civilizations, meticulously documented in historical texts, philosophical treatises, and contemporary reports, from the sprawling trade routes of the Abbasid Caliphate to the philosophical underpinnings of Greek society. Its influence still felt in the human trafficking networks reported across 2025. The evidence, crumbling archaeological artifacts, faded writings, and UN trafficking statistics, urges us to reflect on a cycle of suffering that demands we break its hold. If this moves you to your core, hit that like button and subscribe now. Comment below your thoughts, your voice shapes this vital dialogue. The legacy of this exploitation stretched far beyond the caliphates, leaving its mark on ancient Greece's own dark practices. Picture the reflective, somber scene, the soft, crackling rustle of papyrus scrolls turning in a dimly lit Greek library, the sour, oily tang of olive oil lamps burning late into the night, the weighty, oppressive silence as you read of pederasty, temple prostitution, and the commodification of youth. Greek society, often lauded for its democratic ideals and philosophical brilliance, mirrored aspects of Islamic enslavement with institutionalized pederastic relationships between older men and young boys in cities like Athens, and temple priestesses forced into sacred prostitution in Corinth to honor the gods. Historians like Plutarch note how these practices were justified as cultural norms, echoing the Quranic sanctions that underpinned caliphate policies, while Herodotus records erotic magic rituals and zoophilic myths that normalized exploitation. The transition from Islamic conquests to Greek traditions reveals a shared thread, exploitation cloaked as tradition, evident in the slave markets of both cultures, where human lives were bartered for power. Was this a cultural exchange of ideas across civilizations or a universal stain of power that tainted every society it touched, a system that normalized suffering under the guise of progress? The question lingers as the scrolls crumble in your hands. Many endured this legacy, their resilience a faint, fading echo across time, their pain a shared burden woven into the fabric of Western thought, their stories reshaped and lost to history's reinterpretation, their voices silenced by the weight of philosophical justification. The influence persists, bridging the past and present with unsettling, undeniable parallels that demand our attention. Imagine the somber, reflective atmosphere, the distant, mournful hum of a 2025 news report detailing human trafficking in conflict zones, the bitter, sharp taste of coffee turning sour in your mouth as you process the Yazidi survivors' accounts, the cold, heavy weight of realization settling in your chest as you connect the ancient chains to the modern shackles. Modern trafficking networks, documented by organizations like the United Nations, echo the caliphate's markets with chilling accuracy, where women and children are still commodified in war-torn regions, their fates mirroring those of centuries past. Philosophical justifications from Plato, who saw slavery as a natural order, to Islamic jurists like Al-Ghazali, who framed it as a divine right, linger in today's debates over consent, rights, and autonomy, a mindset that perpetuates the cycle. The Hagia Sophia, once a Christian church and now a mosque, stands as a monument built on the profits of enslaved labor, its stones whispering of the human cost, while Roman and Greek influences further entwine this legacy in Western civilization. Was this a historical inevitability we couldn't escape, or a lesson we've failed to learn, a system whose echoes demand we take action to end its repetition? The question lingers as the news fades into silence. Many suffer still, their resilience a powerful call to action in our time, their pain a mirror reflecting history's failures, their stories urging us to remember and act. This ends our journey through the darkness, but the fight for justice begins now. Smash that like button if you're inspired to make a difference, and subscribe now to join us in seeking change and honoring their memory.